Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Okay, so Detroit the movie. Detroit the movie. So, okay, let me try to stick to my notes because there's a lot that I have thought about the movie. First of all, when Poetry on my Twisted Life with Poetry suggested that we review it, I wasn't really familiar, but I'm like, okay, because I'm game. Hey, I like to watch a movie as well as anybody else. A movie called Detroit sounds good. Let's go. Let's do it. So stick around for my thoughts. I'm Angela. The channel is Be Fabulous You. Born and raised in Detroit. I'm a Detroit girl. So when she said, I'm like, okay, cool. Then when I saw one of the little previews couple months out, I was like, oh, trailers. I was like, oh, okay, that looks interesting. So just to put it in context, in Detroit, the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History did like a year-long conversation series of lectures, talks, films, explorations, forums, panel discussions about the 1967 insurrection, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, that happened here in Detroit. So there's been an ongoing conversation in this community, placing the 1967 events in the broader context of the world, of the country, of history, of politics, of whatever. So just very educational and very helpful in terms of putting things in context. I'm not necessarily a fan of Hollywood films. I feel like it's basically propaganda for the most part. They have a formula for making money. A lot of times the formula is not about delivering truth or delivering accuracy, but delivering dollars to the people who are heads of these studios or whatever. It's like money transfer from the poor back to the 1%. So, they have all different kinds of systems to get our money and to use us giving them our money to help keep us in the same position that we're in and to help keep them in the same position that they're in. So I'm not really a fan of Hollywood movies, although I do love a film. I love a book. I love a movie. I love a play. I love a story. I love a story. I love a story. I'm a story girl. Would you tell me a story, please? So once I saw the first little trailer, I was kind of like, okay, this looks like it might be interesting. Meanwhile, I'm steadily, kind of hearing stuff. And, just at lectures and stuff around the city, around town, mostly at the Wright Museum, talking to people, you always around. To me in Detroit, I'm always around progressive people, interesting people. And so at some point I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to see the film. I wasn't speaking explicitly about the film, but I guess realizing that it was a Hollywood film, I'm kind of like, what kind of story are they going to be putting out? What kind of agenda are they going to have? Kind of what's up. So let me just go through the quick notes of what I was supposed to technically be discussing with regard to the film. I also want to talk about the Detroit Tribunal, the Detroit People's Tribunal. I don't know what the proper term is, but there was, after the incident at the Algiers Motel, there was a community event where the community had attorneys on both sides of the case and tried 3 or 4 of the cops that were involved with the Algiers situation, as well as the black person, Diz Mooks, who was played by, what's that child's name? Boyega, John Boyega in the film. So there were 3 or 4 people tried by the people. Rosa Parks was one of the jurors. Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick was involved with organizing it. I understand she was a college student at that time. She went on to be in politics, maybe a state congressperson or a federal congressperson. I'm not really sure, but her son was the mayor of Detroit for a while, and we actually graduated from the same high school the same year. I don't know if he's class of 89, but we were in high school together. We weren't friends, but I have also connections to his family through my brother, who is a first cousin of his. So, Detroit is small. But they, these people were involved. So I want to talk about the tribunal and the notes that I had from that event from the people who had been involved with organizing it. So Detroit, the fact that the name of the movie is Detroit is one thing that I've heard a couple people mention. I didn't really think anything about it. When I did reflect on it, my general feeling was that I feel like I think that you can take one moment in history and you could claim that it's a quintessential representation of a place or a period of time. But I don't feel like that movie was a quintessential reflection of Detroit. Detroit, to me, or my Detroit, is just this strong, organized, powerful Black community. When I hear, like, for example, if you hear, when you come to Detroit and you get a Jamon Jordan tour of downtown, or a conversation about the Underground Railroad, you start to get a feeling and a sense of a Black community that, to me, is quintessentially Detroit. When he talking about people in 1831 getting together and being like, no, we not gonna take that because I'm from Detroit. That's the Detroit I know. And we're standing here for justice, and we're handling things in a creative way, and we're bold, and all kinds of interesting and powerful things come from Detroit and are uniquely Detroit because it's Detroit. So you have the Nation of Islam that comes from Detroit. It couldn't have come from any place else. People don't even know about the Shrine of the Black Madonna, but the Shrine of the Black Madonna comes from Detroit. Some people in Atlanta and Houston know about it. But the fact that 50 years ago, they had a painting of a Black Madonna and Child at the church, and it was like considered radical. And then during the rebellion, insurrection, whatever, people took a statue that was outside and they painted the hands and the face of the Madonna and Child black. It got painted back, and then the church decided to keep it black. That's a Detroit thing. The Republic of New Africa is a Detroit thing. Ron Milner is a Detroit thing. There's so many things that are Detroit, that are quintessentially Detroit, that only come from Detroit, could only come from Detroit. The League of Revolutionary Black Voters is Black Workers is a Detroit thing. The black slate that came off the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Coleman Young, 20 years, the first Black mayor of Detroit. I should be a historian, but there are some things that are uniquely Detroit. The fact that Detroit is, when I was growing up, I think Detroit was 85% black. They say it's 80% black, but you have a black city. It's just, Detroit is Detroit. And to me, that movie, you don't get a feel, that movie could have taken place, to me, anywhere in the country. You don't get a sense of Detroit. If they had the People's Tribunal in that movie, if they had the fact that there was an organized Black community reflected in that movie, I could have, but the title, I'm like, I guess she said it was for marketing purposes. I don't know if the name Detroit sells movies, but I think it sort of perpetuates, to me, the film perpetuates this idea of like chaotic, like it's like the Black people in some sense just seem like they like chaotically just started throwing bottles at the cops, and like, these wild Black people, and that's Detroit, all of these Black people, they just wild and they just wilding out. But that's not, I feel like that movie didn't put stuff in context, so it doesn't make sense. Now, Detroiters are fighters. So, but not just over some bull or not for nothing, but people do. So anyway, the title, whatever, 1967 Detroit. Again, I feel like there was a lack of historical context. Should we expect a white person to be able to provide context? I don't know. I think that artists, it just kind of depends on the artist and where they are developmentally. I think in general, it's harder for a white person to see through to certain truths about Black people than it is for a Black person. But sometimes Black people can't see and understand certain truths. And with anything, we are only approximating the truth. So, it's no surprise to me that that things seemed a little chaotic in terms of the Black people in the movie. Algiers Motel, Hollywood. I talked already a little bit of Hollywood. And then the profit off the pain of Black folks. When I went to an event before the movie, Kanye's son I think it was his son, said, John Conyers, who has been every year, this is Detroit, every year since he been in Congress talking about reparations for black people and putting a bill forth for black people reparations. That's some Detroit stuff. Are people doing that in other parts of the country? If they are, let me know. But that just seemed like that's Detroit. That's Detroit. That's Detroit. But his son said that what he really appreciated about the movie is that it wasn't about just profiting off the pain of black people. And that kind of excited me. And then when I saw the movie, I'm like, I don't understand. It just seemed like a Hollywood movie. So how is it not profiting off of black people? So there might be something I missed, but I'm like, this just seemed like the same old mess. I'm not a person who's like really into violence and watching a whole bunch of violence. So, I just felt like it was like 6 hours of watching people get beat and tortured and harassed mentally, physically, emotionally. And I just didn't have a lot of appreciation for that movie. I'm not familiar with this woman's work, so that might be her style. I don't really know, but it did not appeal to me. The story, I was not really impressed, by the story that was told. So that's kind of where I am a little bit. I only have a few more minutes left on my tape. So let me kind of get to, so the fact that there's one article, and I'm going to try to link the articles because I think it did a really good job. But the fact that in the movie, it was like, oh, so this torture of these people happened at this motel and then there was a trial. But in real life, I don't think that that's what happened. I think that there was a year or two of organizing that led to them finally trying those cops. And the reason that they tried those cops is because there was a year or two of people organizing and not letting that shit rest. So, and part of that year or two of organizing or conversation was the People's Tribunal. Dan Aldrich was one of the organizers. Lonnie Pete, I think is his name. And then on this panel also was a woman named Danielle McGuire. She's a white woman at Wayne State University. She has a book in process. The autopsy, I heard, was purchased by the Detroit Free Press, and they would not share the autopsy with the families. That's some fucked up shit. That's messed up. The Free Press and the News chronicled the tribunal. 4 hours. It was a mock trial. The People's Tribunal allowed folks to participate in the judicial system, and they had been through the tribunal when the real trial happened, so it was sort of cathartic. Barbara Staton, she was a Detroit Free Press reporter. She heard the story. She thought it sounded fishy. She saw that there were so she went to the site of the Algiers. She saw that there were no shots out, but what looked like an army had rampaged the hotel. There were bullet holes everywhere. It was an execution. Her article led to the Department of Justice investigation. Demean, dehumanize, and disappear. That's what they tried to do to us. Y'all can't. So, yeah. Rosa Parks, Scottsboro boys, granddad was a Garveyite. So just putting Rosa Parks in a context of activism, that was one of the things that came up. So yeah, I think probably so in general, I'm like, I didn't pay to see the movie. I saw the movie at the premiere at the Fox Hotel in Detroit. I saw it free. Thank you, Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. There were like 3 or 4, maybe more buses of people that went from a conversation about the tribunal and a panel about the tribunal at the museum to actually seeing the film. And there's supposed to be a conversation after about, the film. But I'm glad that I didn't pay for it. I wouldn't recommend that you pay for it. I think that it is hard to get accurate information about what happened in the world from the perspective of Black folks. So I think this is another example of that. Like, the story is out there, but I just feel like there were a lot of problems with the story. On the panel leading up to it, the only person that was on that panel at the Wright Museum that Catherine Bigelow put together, and she is a woman director. I think she's the only woman who has won Best Director or something like that. And so it's hard out here on these streets for women. It's hard out here on these streets for black folks. I don't know if that gives her a pass or not. She probably got criticism harder as a woman than she would have as a white woman than she would have as a white man. I don't know. But the only witness was one of the white women who was there. She served on the panel. So it's kind of like, I don't know who how they did the research and who their reference points were. I read an article. This is really incoherent because there's a lot I'm trying to say in a little bit of time. I just want to get it done because I said I was going to do it. But there was a lot of articles and different stuff that I've been reading. But one article described the two white women as hitchhikers, which I thought was really interesting because I was kind of like, we never saw them hitchhiking. And there's conversation in this community that those women were prostitutes. And I noticed that the white woman on the panel was like, we weren't prostitutes. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know about that. And then later I heard people talk about the fact that they were prostitutes. I don't know if they're prostitutes or not. If you get money for having sex with people, does that make you, I don't, there's like, to me, there's like a whole gray area or whatever. But she was like, oh, we were just innocent girls having fun because we loved music. The article called them hitchhikers, which I was confused by because I'm like, we never saw them hitchhike. We only saw them at the hotel. So it seemed like the article went out of the way to portray them as something just so to avoid, I guess, calling them prostitutes, they called them hitchhikers, but we never saw them hitchhike. So that was, so I thought the movie was the same old Hollywood bullshit. That's my review. The recap was, it felt like 6 hours of torture to me. The piece where there was one white cop who was really portrayed as the evil cop, I think is misleading. In one article, and hopefully the article I'm going to link, they talk about the fact that John Conyers was like, this wasn't a riot of people. This was a police riot. The police were out here rioting and wilding out and acting crazy. And I feel like if the Conyers character in the movie had said that, I would have thought that that was like quintessential Detroit type statement. But the Conyers character in the movie was just standing up on the car being like, basically, can't we all just get along? That again, that could have been anywhere. When I was talking to Poetry, she was like, yeah, that was like this guy in Ferguson or in, her region of the country did something similar. So, yeah, that's it. I don't really have much more to say about the movie. Did you see it? What did you think about it? Are you reading articles about it? Do you care about it? Do you have high expectations of Hollywood films to give you accurate information about history and about the truth? This Dunkirk film that's out, this is totally unrelated, but the fact that it's been whitenized seems like a typical Hollywood move. They telling their story, in their ways, and that's what you should expect from them. So that's what I got. I'm Angela. The channel is Be Fabulous You. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, subscribing. Thumbs up. I'm working on 150 subscribers. If you are a subscriber, thank you. Comment down below. Be you. Be fabulous. Be fabulous you. And I love me some god doggone Detroit. Detroit.